Good evening, everyone. It's Sparrow here, and I am back with Talking Sugar. That is our new talk show where we talk about the nerdy things that we love. And tonight I have a good friend with me, my friend Rekujira. We've been friends for a long time, and tonight I'm really excited to talk about the Xeno series. That's Xenosaga, Xenogears, Xenoblade, all about them, because my friend Reku, he is really into them, and I am excited to be schooled. Because unlike the Sonic the Hedgehog series, if you caught the first episode, I don't know as much about the Xeno series, but I am all about that anime stuff, that anime bullshit, as they call it. So I'm really excited to talk sugar with Reku. So let's bring him on. Everyone give him a big round of applause. Hello!
And that's how I got away with tax fraud.
Welcome to the show. I'm glad you got out of jail just for this episode.
Thank you. Glad to be here. Glad to not be over there.
Yeah, so please introduce yourself for the audience.
Yes, I am Rekujira, usually go by Reku. I am a streamer of my own. I have been following the Xeno series since it came out in North America for a very long time. We'll get there. And yeah, I stream here on Twitch. I do gaming stuff. I do live 2D rigging. I did that live 2D rigging. Looking at your model. And very excited to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, I'm excited too, because I think this is going to be a really fun episode, because, specifically because I don't know as much about it. So I really, let's just jump straight in. What is the Xeno series about? Can you give us a quick 1 to 3 sentence summation of the whole entire series? Ready, go.
You kill God, there's lots of robots, and don't think about it.
But I want to think about it. I want to talk about it.
I know. No. And so where do we want to start on this? Brief series, super.
Yeah, let's just kind of give us how did you first get into this series? Where does your love for the series come from?
Well, God. Okay, so I started playing these games as they were coming out in the late 90s. Original PlayStation 1 title, Xenogears, came out in North America in 1998. Also, fun fact, today is in fact the 26th anniversary of Xenogears' release.
Wow. I did that on purpose, everyone.
Totally. I'm the one who got Keikaku here. Yeah, so I played it in high school, and what really struck me about it is I grew up playing all the Final Fantasy games, a couple of Dragon Quest here and there, and some other RPGs, so I grew up playing JRPGs. Mm-hmm. But what really struck me about the Xeno series is that's the first one I played where it was really apparent that the world felt lived in. It felt the level of detail of the plot and the characters was just leagues beyond anything else I had ever played, and it just absolutely gripped me as a kid. Much of that continued on with the further games in the series. Different Xenogears and Saga and Blade all have kind of different emphasis. They emphasize different things, both in terms of narrative and gameplay, especially gameplay. And I played the ever-loving hell out of the game. I played Xenogears 5 or 6 times to completion.
Wow. And how many hours is that? How long to beat?
Well, my first playthrough was probably 70 hours or so, just because I didn't know how to do everything, and it took a long time. But, once you do it enough times, you can do 100% run in about 45 hours. No.
Wow, that's all.
It's a really long game. All of them are really long. But, yeah, and let's see, Xenosaga came out while I was in college. Don't think about that too hard. And I played. We'll get to this. The Xeno series, the earlier games had a bit of a troubled development history, but I played through all the games in college. I absolutely loved them. And then the Blade series, which is the one new fans are going to be the most familiar with because it's the most accessible. They're all out on Nintendo Switch now. Play them all. They're great. I have very much fondness for that series too, and a lot of what I appreciate about Blade is I don't want to say spot the reference, but there are recurring themes in characters and storytelling and themes and tropes and all that. Like, I wish I had something super insightful to say, but it's clear that Tetsuya Takahashi, the creator of all these games, well, the original creator, I would say, no developer is an island. It takes a team.
That's true.
But sort of the leading man throughout this entire series, he clearly likes revisiting certain themes and messages, and that's really apparent in his work, especially Xenoblade 2 and 3. And we'll get there. But these games are great. God, trying to think where else I can go with this.
So I know you've talked a little bit about how it had a very storied development, and it seems like it's a very complicated background to the series.
So I want to know where you found this chart, because it's a shit post. Oh, I should cool it. It's a joke, but it's also, there's enough truth in this chart to where it almost makes sense. I have a few questions. I don't know why Dragon Ball is on there. I don't know why Roller Coaster Tycoon is on there, but yeah. So Gears came before Saga, came before Blade, and you've got one thing worth noting, those of you who have played this little-known indie title called Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, a lot of the Xenoblade staff worked on Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. A lot of the open-world tech was developed by the Xenoblade crew.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah. Around the time Xenoblade 2 was in development was around the time Breath of the Wild was in development, and we'll get to this when we talk about more about Xenoblade in general, but it boggles my mind just how they got all that working on an NVIDIA Shield tablet from 2014.
Meaning the Nintendo Switch.
Yes, the Nintendo Switch. It was no spring chicken when it came out. I'm not throwing shade. I love the Switch. It's a great piece of hardware. But how can you render sightlines that far, environments that densely populated? I don't get it. Yeah, it's crazy. It shouldn't work.
I haven't played the Xenoblade games, but I really admire how just beautiful they are.
Yeah. The art direction on all these games has been really, really good.
Yeah.
We're on this now. Why don't we talk about Xenoblade for just a few minutes?
Sure.
So the prior games, Xenogears and Xenosaga, were pretty linear story-wise, linear gameplay. You did have some levels of exploration in those games, but it's largely, you follow the predetermined story path. There are side quests and all that, but you're kind of on rails for a lot of it, especially Xenosaga, which I love. But it is, people have complained about the series being too linear. It's true. Xenoblade actually marked a very strong departure from that, because while there is still a very strong central narrative, they sort of aped the MMO kind of gameplay where you have these massive open worlds and you can tackle side quests and all that sort of in any, not strictly any order, but there's a lot of side content you can do. And the environments themselves, traversal became a big deal. There are some interior spaces, but when you reach the Guar Plains for the first time, you just see this massive open field, and it's become a trope now, but if you see a landmark, you can just go there. So, it's not just everything's a skybox. You actually explore these environments, and exploration is a strong part of the central gameplay.
And that's where, this is the game you said that they built Tears of the Kingdom, or not Tears of the Kingdom, Breath of the Wild, using the same technology.
Yes. Yeah. The Xenoblade team ported some of their open world tech for, and expanded it further for developing Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom.
Wow.
The developers, so again, we're kind of discussing this in a random order. Hi, have we met? The Xenoblade series is developed by a team called Monolith Software. Monolith Software used to be owned by Namco Bandai, when they made the Xenosaga series. And that was an offshoot of the original development team for Xenogears when they left Square.
Oh, wow.
So Xenogears was Square. Xenosaga was Monolith Software with Namco Bandai as the publisher. Xenoblade is still Monolith Software, but I think for Blade, they were a subcontractor or Nintendo was just the publisher. But after Xenoblade, they got fully acquired by Nintendo. And so they still exist as, I don't know the corporate lingo, but they are still a separate division, but they are owned by Nintendo. And so that's how they got all their staff to make this, to do Breath of the Wild and all that fun stuff. Their open world tech is fantastic.
Wow. That's really interesting. So I know these stories are famously a bit dense. So let's
that's the neat part. It doesn't.
So let's kind of like go back to the beginning. Like, what would you say are like the main overarching like kind of like themes, kind of archetypes that these stories kind of like explore?
Sure. So let's see where to start. Now, before I get too far along, I will admit my ignorance on certain topics. Much of the theming and messaging in the game, not messaging, but a lot of the devices they used are based on Christian Gnosticism, which is something I do not know very much about. I've done a little bit of reading in here, but do not take my word as gospel. But I do know that that's clearly a devices with that resonate with Tetsuya Takahashi because they're all over in Gears, Saga, and Blade. And my limited understanding of the subject is like Gnosticism has a pretty like in existence. There is an upper level of existence and a lower level. Whether you want to call that like the spirit world or heaven, tomato, however you want to label it. And in all of these games, there are separate realms of existence. You have the spiritual world or the upper domain or whatever. And then there's always like an air quote earth domain, the physical plane. People can exist. Well, people do exist as combinations of both physical and spiritual personas. They're usually aligned, but not always. There are multiple characters in this series who are either some characters encounter their spiritual selves existing separately, sometimes as an ally, sometimes as an antagonist. I think in Xenogears, at one point, there's 4 versions of the same guy running around.
Whoa.
It's actually pretty easy to keep track of who's who, but once you realize, oh, that's what's going on. That's weird. And
is it different facets of the same character? Like one is like the id and one is the ego or what have you?
You've been doing some reading, haven't you? Yes, in Gears in particular, there's an id. I'm not going to go too hard into spoilers because I do want people to play these games, but I'm also not going to go too hard to avoid spoilers because these games have been out for 20 years. But yes, some characters through trauma, physical, emotional, or God only knows what, their selves can be split into multiple facets. And over the course of their respective journeys, the way to victory, the way to overcome their challenges is to reunify and become a whole being again, or at the very least make peace with their other selves. That's a recurring theme that happens a lot in, well, all 3 series of Xeno. Let's see.
I wonder, I know this series has been kind of like jokingly called like Evangelion like in space. I'm guessing that's mostly just because of the Christian themes, or at least the visuals that are kind of like used as kind of like set dressing. Is that kind of the case?
Tetsuya Takahashi loves him some Christian imagery. Evangelion in space is funny. I'm not going to get too hung up on the in space part because, well, really, Xenosaga is the space opera of it. Nobody cares. Leave me alone. But I can kind of see where they make that comparison just because the story is pretty confusing at first glance. Things don't always make a lot of sense. And there are certain things where, is there a deep explanation? Maybe, maybe not. It also just looks really damn cool.
Yeah, it just looks cool.
And that's okay. The rule of cool can apply to video games and not just for shonen anime.
So I want to know what this means.
All right, let me zoom in on that. Okay. Let me nudge out of the way. So Tetsuya Takahashi is a nerd. He loves him some nerd things. There are all sorts of anime and even not just anime, but like general sci-fi references all throughout the Xeno series. And one thing he really likes is robots. I can understand. I too like robots. And so let me go to another window. I can read this a little more clearly.
Yeah, it says
Okay.
under Xenogears, they're called gears. Under Xenoblade, they're called forced mechon. Under Xenoblade Chronicles, they're called skells. And under Xenosaga, they're eggs. My eggs.
Okay. So, yeah, those are just the names he uses for giant robots in the respective series.
Eggs?
Well, actually, that is how it's pronounced. Let's see. Come on, brain. All right. Yeah. So in Xenogears, the robots are called gears because that's a cool word.
That makes sense.
In Xenoblade, the term is faced mechon. Those are sort of like the big antagonist commander units. I won't go into the lore on there. Xenoblade actually has an entire faction of this is getting into a very brief story overview, but Xenoblade 1, it takes place on 2 separate land masses that are gods. These things are massive. They're the size of continents, and that's where the story takes place. And one god eggs. We'll get to eggs. There is a reason. And in Xenoblade, one of the gods produces organic life. The other god and populates with that. The other god produces mechanical life. So it's machines of all kinds of shapes and sizes. And the mechanical god is called the Mechanus, hence Mechon. Xenoblade X probably has some of the most robust mech combat in all of them, and they call them skells because that's cool. Although I think maybe in the Japanese version they're called dolls. That I'm not sure about. Don't quote me. And then the reason they're called eggs in Xenosaga, it's technically AGWS, Anti-Gnosis Weapon System. They're pronounced, depending on the voice actor in the English dubs, it's eggs, AEGS, or eggs.
Eggs.
And then there's also ES units, which are Ein Sof, which are, for lack of a better term, god robots. They're cool.
I see. Wow. So let's jump in and kind of talk about each game a little bit. Toxan calls them Aegis out of spite. Isn't that a character from another game?
Toxan, did you do that before or after playing Xenoblade?
So it's eggs with an accent or eggs without an accent. Eggs.
That's a very good way to put it, Skylark. Yes, I can agree with that assessment. Excuse me while I take a sip of something that is not water. Good times.
But like the Xenogears games, what system did they come out on?
Xenogears is technically only one title, and it came out on the Sony PlayStation. It was developed around the same time as Final Fantasy VII. In fact, it was actually originally going to be Final Fantasy VII, but they kind of pulled the plug on that. I don't know the whole story, but the version that gets floated around is Square looked at it and was like, this is too dark. We can't go here with this. And so it was spun off to its own game. But Xenogears is only one game, and fun fact, when you beat Xenogears, the end screen says Xenogears Episode 5, the end. There are no episodes 1 through 4, nor is there an episode 6.
The first game is episode 5?
Yes, it is.
That's very Star Wars of them.
Very. I hadn't thought of it that way. You're not wrong. Let's see.
Yeah, so the first thing, Final Fantasy VII they do is commit a terrorism, eco-terrorism.
You do a terrorism. But no. So Xenogears is a 6-part story, but he only ever made up Part 5 as a game. But Part 5 does have lots of callbacks to episodes 1 through 4, or what would have been episode 1 through 4. And there is an art book for Xenogears called the Xenogears Perfect Works. I own a copy, original printing, no big deal. And they actually have a pretty in-depth story outline of episodes 1 through 4, as well as episode 6. As a game, as a story, Xenogears does work. It's a shame that episodes 1 through 4 and 6 never got made, but Xenogears does stand on its own. It's a complete story, and it works really, really, really well.
You don't really need to know what happens in episodes 1 through 4 or what have you?
No, and good luck finding out, because again, there were never games for them. It's just an
outline in the art book.
Yeah.
Well, the style of these games is really, really stylish. It doesn't use 3D characters like Final Fantasy does, or Final Fantasy VII in particular. It uses lots of pixel art.
Yeah. This is actually one other cool thing that struck me about the game. I'm not going to say this is the first RPG to do it because I don't know. But it's the first one I ever really got into where you do explore these environments. Like we're looking at a battle sequence right now with the boss, particularly famous boss. And that's sort of like, side isometric 2D. I mean, but the environment's 3D. But you actually explore 3D environments in the game. So it's 2D characters interacting in a 3D environment. That's part of what really got the immersion for me in my dumb teenage brain. Like, I don't think I'd ever played an RPG like that before, where you actually traverse the environments versus just, scrolling up and down.
I feel like
in that manner, it's kind of an opposite of Final Fantasy VII, which had 3D characters projected on 2D planes.
Yeah, I feel like this kind of style is kind of come back in vogue, like kind of what they call it, the 2.5D.
Yes, yeah, that's the lingo. Thank you.
They show the, really beautiful pixel art characters on more of a kind of like 3D-ish kind of background, or painterly kind of background, but it's also rendered in 3D. I feel like that's really kind of like come back into style, and I like it.
Yeah, yeah. They kind of do that in Octopath Traveler, though I don't think you can rotate the camera around in that. But yeah, in Xenogears, part of the exploration was, you can actually hit the top left and right bumper to rotate the camera around, and that's how you traverse some of these environments. It also led to some really kind of clunky platforming sessions, Tower of Babel. No, it was cool. It was a really cool idea. I'm not going to say it's the first game to ever do that, but it's the first one that really jumped out at me with the games I played growing up.
So what is kind of like a very brief, like kind of like summary of like, what is this game like about? I know it's some of the characters. Like, I love the kind of, I mean, I would call it kind of a retro anime look nowadays. Back then, I suppose it was modern.
Yeah. So a brief story intro to Xenogears, and all right, opening cutscene. You're in outer space. There's this giant colony ship just flying through the eternal void of outer space. You don't know what the ship is. What's it called? Why is it out there? Don't worry about it. Except that all of a sudden, don't worry about it. Except, as they're cruising along, all of a sudden you see these warning lights go off, and some sort of like alien presence, alien monster just starts taking over the ship. Again, what is it? What's it doing? Don't worry about it. You'll figure out in about 30 hours. The captain orders the ship to self-destruct lest this thing break free, and it crash lands on a nearby planet. Fast forward a few, 1,000 years. What happens? Don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
We focus on our protagonist here, front and center, the young man with the long hair, Fei Fong Wong. He is an 18-year-old youth. He is an amnesiac, and was brought to the village of Lahan when he was 15. He doesn't have any memories of his life before then. Lahan is kind of like a little backwoods village out in the middle of nowhere that is untouched by a global conflict between two massive warring nations, Kislev and Ava. They've been fighting for 100 years. Why are they fighting? Don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it.
It's actually mentioned in the prologue, like they've been fighting so long they don't even remember why they're fighting anymore.
Wow.
Anyway, they've been at each other's throats forever. Lahan's avoided pretty much all of the fighting, and the fighting has actually gotten worse in recent indeterminate period of time because they were fighting on the foot with guns, conventional warfare. But then this third-party faction discovered giant robots.
Oh.
Things escalated, and then all of a sudden this other third party, I guess I would call it a fourth party, started backing Ava with more weaponry and more technology to where now Ava has the upper hand.
Ava?
A-V-E-H. Different Ava.
Different Ava.
Hashtag not that a robot. And sort of the action of the story starts when one of these skirmishes goes to the village of Lahan. Surprise, surprise, the protagonist's hometown gets destroyed because it's a JRPG. Of course it does. But in the skirmish, Faye commandeers a robot, loses control of it, and then loses control of the robot, passes out, wakes up, and everyone is terrified of him.
Oh.
He doesn't know what he did, and no one's telling him what he did. And so he's banished from town and kind of has to survive on his own for a while. There's more to it than that, but I don't want to take up all the time. That is the introduction to Xenogears. What develops over time is this massive globe-trotting story, different factions, different people vying for power. And another thing that struck me about this game as I was getting into it is, you visit a whole bunch of different locales, and these spaces actually, the way you interact with them and the way they feel like, I played all the Final Fantasies growing up, and there are some really cool environments in there, cool locales, but none of them, at least to my dumb teenage brain at the time, none of them really felt all that different. They kind of felt like, I hate to use the term palette swap because people work very hard on these games, but the spaces didn't feel that different. Well, when you go to the nation of Ava, it's a desert kingdom. The way you traverse that is different. It looks and feels unique. Later on, you go to Kislev, which is a much more industrial, kind of northern country, and it feels different. Another cool thing I like about the environments in these games is as you're traversing towns, you have townsfolk you talk to, shops and all that, but there's one moment that struck me. You can go through a cafe in one of the desert towns, and there are NPCs there, having meals. You can talk to them. Not super consequential dialogue, but if you stand in a certain place, there's one NPC who's a server going around, handing meals, taking checks, bussing tables, and if you're in his path, he yells at you unprompted. And I don't recall seeing that kind of level of NPC interactivity, making it feel like a lived-in space in other games as I was growing up. And there's all sorts of little details like that sprinkled in every locale you go to.
Yeah, even in just this kind of like overworld kind of view that we're seeing in the background right now, you can see where kind of Final Fantasy VII had kind of similar kind of feel to it. Traversing the world and kind of like this airship, then you're pulled into random battles. But I love the pixel art for these. They're so stylish, so. Like, what year was this game made?
It came out in North America in 1998.
I was about to say, like, late
I don't know
90s.
its Japanese release date.
Yeah.
Might be, well, if today's the 26th anniversary, then it must have come out in February 10th, 1998.
Wow.
That's because that's how time works.
Oh, there's the Babel Tower that you didn't want to talk about.
That was a joke. Babel Tower is kind of notorious because... this is one of those games that still had like random encounters. So as you're just walking in the overworld, boop, there's a monster. And it's got Tower of Babel has some platforming sections, and the platform mechanics are a little. This game is not a platformer, so you can easily whiff some jumps that you swore you had, and you probably did, and you get penalized by having 2 extra fights as you climb back up.
So this series, or this Xenosaga, this was your first intro to this whole series.
That's correct. Yeah. This is the first one that came out, and yep, the first one I played.
Oh, I know you had mentioned also, like, so this was developed the same time as Final Fantasy VII, and there's this kind of like little Easter egg you pointed out to me, which was really, really interesting. Like,
yeah, I didn't find this out till years later. I mean, spoilers for a 27-year-old game that's currently getting remake games, so maybe that is spoilers. Deal with it. Yeah, at one point in disc 2, I guess, when Cloud is out of commission, and he's sort of comatose and just rambling to himself, these lines right here, 1 billion... Now, this may be from a fan translation, because I don't know if this is the original dialogue as writ, but the crux of it's the same. Deal with it. 1 billion mirror fragments, small light. That is a line from one of the main theme songs of Xenogears, Small Two of Pieces. And then the second panel here, angels, singing voices, Xenogears. There you go.
Interesting. They just kind of like snuck that in there.
Yeah.
I know we're kind of circling back to the kind of like Christian Gnosticism angle, but I have to ask, what is going on in this picture?
Let us all give thanks to Chu-Chu. Chu-Chu is great. Chu-Chu is good. Chu-Chu died for your sins.
Chu-Chu.
Amen.
What is
So this is just a funny scene that keeps getting brought up because, like, to a Western audience, this scene is absolutely absurd.
Yeah.
Chu-Chu is not the only one being sacrificed. These crosses are big enough to hang giant robots.
Oh, wow.
Which is exactly what's suspended on them. Why is Chu-Chu the size of a giant robot? Don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah, this is a scene from late in the game, and for the longest time, people thought, oh, well, okay, random crucifixion. But I heard somewhere fairly, why not? But I heard fairly recently, this is actually more of a throwback to a tokusatsu scene.
Oh.
But I'm the wrong person to ask about which one it is exactly.
Maybe someone in chat can enlighten us. Otherwise, don't worry about it.
Yeah, don't worry about it. I don't mean to keep stealing that tagline, but it's a good tagline.
Oh, that's so funny.
Yeah.
So what?
No, this is just a particularly famous scene because the imagery is absurd.
What is this little guy?
This little guy is a little girl named Chu-Chu. She is something. Xenogears doesn't have a single animal mascot per se, but if it did, it would probably be Chu-Chu.
Chu-Chu, it's a little animal mascot.
Chu-Chu's a little animal that follows you around and is actually a party member who can fight with you. And for reasons, don't worry about it. She can grow to the size of a giant robot. There's actually a funny gimmick you can do because, all right, super brief overview. Xenogears has two different battle systems. There's the battle system when you're fighting on foot, like we saw with that sewer sequence.
Yeah.
And there's another battle system where you're fighting in the robots, like we saw when that little submarine was going around the surface of the water. Your character stats, there is some interplay between character development, building your on-foot characters skills and levels, and your gears, your mechs. But the progression system is largely different, except for this little critter here, because her gear form stats, her big form stats, are based on and directly tied to her small form stats. And there are items you can buy to boost your character stats. So basically, you just pump her full of performance-enhancing drugs, and she's unstoppable.
That is very interesting. There's always weird anime stuff in these games.
There is so much anime bullshit in these games. That's actually something I particularly love about some of the later Xenoblade installments. But if you like yourself some anime bullshit, the Xeno series has something for you. Xenosaga is very big on like sci-fi tropes. It's like big outer space battles and warships and all that. And I don't know where we're going to get. I don't know if we're quite at that point in the conversation or how I want to tie that in. But Xenoblade, in particular, Xenoblade 2 and to a lesser extent 3. That is some A+, and I say this term with genuine affection, A+ anime bullshit.
Yeah.
Like you want to talk like power of friendship, yelling loud makes you stronger. The protagonist from Xenoblade Chronicles 2, Rex, is a good boy. He is a good boy, and he solves his problems by just working really fucking hard and yelling really freaking loud. Power of friendship, all that crap, and it works almost every time.
Wow. Well, let's go back in sequence and let's talk through the next series of games very briefly.
Yes.
The Xenosaga games. So this is another series of games kind of in the series. It starts with Xenogears, then we go to Xenosaga.
Kinda, sorta. So Xenosaga was developed after Tetsuya Takahashi formed Monolith Software and split from Square. When he announced Xenosaga, everyone was like, oh, he's continuing the series. We're going to get episodes 1 through 4. And he said, whoa, 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 hold your horses. I would very much like to tell those stories, but I don't own those rights anymore. I don't own those games. Those are owned by Square. So think of this series as more of an homage, maybe retreading some of those themes, but it is not a direct prequel or continuation.
I see. And it doesn't include any of the same characters. It's a completely different cast.
The cast is different. Now, there are a couple of characters who are visual nods back to Xenogears. I won't go into detail. There are a couple of characters who are visual throwbacks, but no, this is a completely different cast, different set of circumstances, some similar themes that repeat themselves, but original story.
Is this the origin of the Cosmos character in this series?
That is correct. Cosmos is Cosmos is from Xenosaga. She is its most famous character. I don't think that's much of a stretch to say. And you've seen her imagery everywhere. There were nods to her in the anime Genshin, or at least in the manga. I think it was the manga. And Cosmos and the purple-haired character to her left, Telos, actually make cameo appearances in Xenoblade 2 as playable characters. But yeah, Cosmos is by far probably the most recognizable thing from Xenosaga. She's cool.
And so the Xenosaga series, that's a series of 3 games. Xenosaga 2 and 3?
So, taking a baby step back, because this applies to Gears as well as Saga. You know how I said that only one Xenogears game ever got made?
Yeah.
Even that got severely truncated. Xenogears' development team was largely very, very new. These are a lot of junior developers who busted their ass and made something absolutely incredible. But they went over they went over schedule, they went over budget, and things got so off track scheduling wise and budget wise that Square actually wanted to split Xenogears into 2 games. But Tetsuya Takahashi made the call of, you know, there was no way of knowing if he'd ever get game 2. They suggested, let's just stop the game at this point. And then hopefully we'll get a second one. And what they did is they basically, a lot of Disc 2 plays like a visual novel. A lot of text on screen, a lot of things telling you what happens rather than showing. It's kind of famous and notorious for that. I didn't mind it because I was a dumbass teenager, but I can see why someone playing through it now would be like, why is this so different? Blah, 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 blah.
And that was because the development got truncated. They couldn't fully flesh out some of those scenes.
They did what they had to do in order to finish the game and finish the story, and for that I have deep respect.
Yeah.
This trend of telling stories too big to tell in video games will continue into Xenosaga. Because Xenosaga, depending on who you listen to, but the version I tend to follow, Xenosaga was all supposed to be probably 6 games long.
Whoa.
It got cut down to 3.
Yeah.
And boy howdy does it have some pacing issues. There are also some other supplemental games. There's actually like I think it was like a web series game that takes place between episodes 2 and 3 that bridges some of the storyline. And I think they expect you to know about that by the time you play Xenosaga 3, which really sucks if you're an American.
Yeah.
Because those games are not released outside of Japan.
That almost sounds like some of the Kingdom Hearts games. They have all these extra little games with sequences of events that you kind of have to follow to really know what's going on.
Yep. Yeah, there's a bit of that. There are also some other games. There was one game that focused, it was kind of a prequel pseudo side story that focused on one character in particular. That was his backstory. And it's necessary information for the central story, but they expect you to have played the game, and they kind of just have to throw a quick recap in very late in Xenosaga Episode 3. Wow. Yeah, so Xenosaga had something of a troubled development history, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, there are 3 games out. They all came out on PlayStation 2. And it does tell a complete story. Some things, it's one of those things where you will have to go and look up the wiki later, because certain things, the heart of the story is communicated, but there's a whole lot of nuts and bolts of like, okay, what was this? How did this happen? Like, I can only process so many proper nouns. Loves them some proper nouns. But yeah.
But you would say that maybe this is more of the weak point of the series, this middle section of games?
I like Xenosaga, but I would say between Gears, Saga, and Blade, Saga is probably the weakest link overall. It's good. I like it. It's a really cool story. But development's kind of disjointed, and as I know at least one person in chat can sympathize, Xenosaga Episode 2 is kind of a slog. It's a really hard game. The battle engine is kind of convoluted, and a lot of people really don't care for Episode 2. I do, but I've got brainworms.
And it seems like it was a big kind of departure from the earlier style of the game. Even if the, themes were similar, now they have these kind of like hyper smooth 3D looking characters versus the kind of very charming 2D anime kind of like characters.
Yeah, they went with a very different design aesthetic for this. The characters are still recognizable, but yeah, they went with a very different look, and that was part of the reason it got something of a mixed reception. Well, that was some people's criticism of it. In Xenosaga Episode 3, I feel like they kind of blended the styles of 1 and 2. Like, it's still pretty damn anime, but not as anime as Episode 1. I feel like Shion and Cosmos in particular look really good with their facial proportions in this style. And to use, I'm over 30, so I'm probably using this wrong. Xenosaga Episode 3 slaps. I love that game. The combat is quick and snappy. The music design is really, really good. I like the aesthetics. My one qualm with Episode 3, and this is nitpicky and kind of shitposty, is as you're running around the environments, your footsteps are cacophonously loud. But if that's my only complaint, then it's a good game.
That's a funny thing that stands out, but if it stands out, it stands out.
It stands out.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I think the art still is really cool from these series. Like, all the robot design seems very stylish, very kind of sharp edges.
Yeah.
To all the robots.
Lots of pointy bots. Yeah,
really, really cool looking. So even if I'm not as much as a fan of this kind of very smooth, I guess PS2 era kind of doll looking characters versus I mean, maybe it's the 90s kid of me that loves this kind of stuff.
There's a lot to be said for the more abstract the graphics are, the more your brain can fill it in.
Yeah.
There's a lot to be said for that. But with 3D, once the graphics got to 3D, you're kind of stuck with what you got. It's detailed enough that there's not a whole lot left to fill in anymore. I think these designs look good.
Yeah.
The tech is old. And that's not me throwing shade. We're literally, 3 whole console generations ahead of this?
Yeah. Some things just age not as well as others.
I can agree with that.
But yeah, still very stylish designs. So let's move into Xenoblade. This is the newer kind of series of games. Is that right?
Yeah. Xenoblade Chronicles, I think it came out in America in 2009, actually as part of a successful fan petition campaign.
Oh, really?
Because interestingly enough, it came out in Japan. It actually came out in the EU, before it came out in America.
Huh? Why was that?
And I don't actually know.
Some sort of licensing issue.
I don't think it's even that. I think there was. Okay, so we're talking Christ, I looked at a calendar. This is 15 years ago. Maybe there was a perception at the time that JRPGs don't sell anymore, blah, blah, blah. Maybe it was as simple as that. But there was a big fan campaign to get a bunch of JRPGs that were made and released on Nintendo Wii. That just hadn't come out in North America to bring them over here. I forgot the name of the fan campaign, but the games were Xenoblade Chronicles, of course, for Nintendo Wii, and also The Last Story, which I have.
Oh, I remember The Last Story.
Yeah, God, I want to play that again, but I want them to remaster. And then Pandora's Tower, I think, was the third one. I don't know very much about that game.
Yeah, not familiar with that one.
Yeah, I don't know much about it. I think it's called Pandora's Tower. But anyway, yeah, Xenoblade Chronicles was part of that campaign, and because it was already released in the EU and the United Kingdom, it actually had a British dub, which is kind of interesting. And they actually kind of played with that a bit in Xenoblade 2, which I won't spoil because that's kind of a neat reveal once you figure it out. But I need to play Xenoblade Chronicles 1 in dubbed. I always play it in the God's intended Japanese, but I need to play it in but I need to play the dub just to experience that version of the script. I have heard some clips and excerpts here, and Shulk, the blonde character, has a pretty good voice actor. His delivery for a couple of key lines are really, really famous. But yeah, now what we're watching, just to clarify, is the Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition trailer. They remastered it and put it on Nintendo Switch. On sale now. And that is one thing to note. Xenogears and Xenosaga are pretty hard to come by right now. I don't know if you can still buy Xenogears on the PlayStation Store. Probably not. They did release it on the PlayStation Store during the PS3 era, but I have no idea if that storefront's even live. But Xenoblade Chronicles 1, 2, and 3, if nothing else, they're on Nintendo eShop. So all these games are available if any of these look cool to you. And yeah, Xenoblade Chronicles marks a pretty big departure because like the environments you explore, like I mentioned Xenogears was the first, RPG I remember playing a lot of where you can explore the environments in 3D space. They took that and went absolute ham on Xenoblade. Just because these environments are massive and they're populated. And as you're running around, in MMOs, the joke is you start at level 1 killing rats and you graduate to killing God eventually. In Xenoblade, you start killing rat robots.
Okay.
Well, okay, they're not really rats, but they're small robots. But so many of the creatures you encounter in Xenoblade, there are biomes. These environments are noticeably different from region to region. And to say there's an ecosystem is maybe putting it a little exaggerated, but they made the environments feel very, very different from each other.
Yeah, it looks like this is the remaster you said, but
correct.
It does look like a beautiful game. Like really nice anime style graphics.
Yeah. They made the Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition after Xenoblade 2, when I think they settled on their character modeling tech and styling and all that. And Xenoblade Chronicles 1 is still a pretty good looking game. From Nintendo, the Nintendo Wii version still looks pretty darn good, but the remaster did it a lot of good service. It's a gorgeous game. This art, I don't know the context for this art. I don't know if this is official or a fan work, but
it has a copyright on it from Monolith Soft, so I think it is official art.
Oh, doesn't get much more official than that. Yeah, so these are the 3 protagonists of some of the Xenoblade Chronicles games. On the left, we have Shulk. On the right, we have Good Boy Rex. And in the middle, we have Elma, who is actually from Xenoblade Chronicles X, which is a game I have not talked about yet. That was released on the Wii U, and I'll be honest, I need to say that Wii U. That one is probably, I've heard some people say that's probably the best environment they built as far as how you interact with the space in terms of gameplay and just exploration. It's been a long time since I played it, so I can't agree or disagree with that assessment in good faith. They did a lot of cool stuff in Xenoblade X, but I went in with expectations, and Xenoblade X was not the game I was expecting. And so for that, it kind of left a sour note for me, but that could be me just not giving it a fair shot. I need to replay it. Xenoblade X is definitely the most sci-fi themed of all the Xenoblade games in terms of you've got giant robots. That's where the skells come from. There's a completely separate combat engine for the skells. Some enemies you're meant to fight on foot. Others, if you don't have a robot, you're literally going to get stepped on and die instantly. Admittedly, I have the least to say about Xenoblade X. I really need to play that game again and give it a fair shake.
But you mentioned that these games are much more open world. Does the world feel... I know one of the things you mentioned about the earlier game is how lived in it felt. How each location felt like there was a separate culture there. Is that something that's still carried over into these games?
One moment, because I hadn't thought about that.
Well, what are some of the themes that you think would kind of tie these series together from Gears all the way to Blade, since they have all these very different characters?
Yeah. So the Xenoblade series does kind of continue some of the things they used in Gears with less so the spiritual world and the physical world, but there are spiritual self versus physical self. In all 3 of these games, there are spiritual versions of a character or a split version of a character with whom you have to interact. and to kill God, you must become a complete person. Shulk has to go through Shulk has to go through his arc, and he sees some shit, and he kind of completes himself, so to speak. Another thing in Gnosticism that I understand the basics of, but boy, there's a lot of nuance, is the concept of like a higher god and a lower god, or a higher form of god and a lower form of god. I mentioned in Xenoblade Chronicles 1, the two land masses are gods. We're in the skyline, we're looking at the Mechanis, the mechanical god.
I was about to ask, is this one of the gods in the background?
That is one of the gods. That is the Mechanis. The starting lore for Xenoblade Chronicles is, in the beginning, there was just an infinite ocean. No land, no creatures, just nothing but water stretching into infinity. And then these two massive gods appeared from the water, the Bionis of organic life and the Mechanis of mechanical life. And they just started battling each other. They just had at it for time immemorial until they each delivered a killing blow on the other. And so these two gods are frozen, mid sword blow. In fact, one of the areas you explore in Xenoblade Chronicles 1 is the sword of the Mechanis embedded in the abdomen of the Bionis.
So it's like you're running around on the bodies of two dead gods?
Basically, yes.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. They don't really, in terms of level design, they don't really play with that notion all that much. I mean, these things are so massive that, this is a tortured analogy, but like to an ant, a common street feels like a continent. So you don't really get a sense of scale from, oh, this area looks like an arm. This area looks like a foot.
Yeah, it's not like Shadow of the Colossus where you're literally like crawling along a back or something like that.
Correct. Now, there is a region that is a hand that has fingers, but that's really the only one I can think of. I don't know if this is an intentional, but the Bionis's butt is a marsh.
Oh no. Don't go into the marsh.
Don't go in the marsh. Also, fucking beautiful region. Sorry, I just got tapped by my cat.
He's got a beautiful backside, this god.
Bionis got back. What can I say?
That's amazing. So does the series, so it's another kind of like 3 game series basically. Does it have any of the kind of like nonsense where it's like part 6 of 12, or is it just 1, 2, and 3? Does that tell the full story?
So there are some narrative threads that connect between 1, 2, and 3. But it's not like to play 2, you must have played 1. To play 3, you must have played the prior 2. If I was being flippant about it, I would say Tetsuya Takahashi learned his lesson and learned how to make a complete game. But that's being flippant. No, 1, 2, and 3 are perfectly good standalone games on their own. You will get a little bit more out of 2 and 3 if you've played the earlier installments, but the whole series is not required playing to enjoy it. Even Xenoblade Chronicles 3, like, there are some callbacks to 1 and 2. There are certain visual elements that won't make any goddamn sense. But to the heart of the story in 3, it doesn't. You don't need to know. They tell you enough of what you need to know from 1 and 2. Certain things you won't get the full impact of, but you can perfectly follow along and have a fantastic time with Xenoblade Chronicles 3.
Are they set in the same world of the dead gods that you're crawling around on, or are they different worlds for each game?
Yes and no. Well, okay, this part is not a spoiler because it's in the marketing. Xenoblade Chronicles 3 takes place on a combination of Xenoblade 1 and 2's worlds. How did that happen? Don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it.
I mean, there is an explanation, but yeah, 3... There are recurring visual elements in 1, 2, and 3, especially 3, because 3 is a mishmash of 1 and 2, but each time it's a different set of characters with different arcs, different stories. There are some recurring themes. You can kind of hear, there are some things that rhyme, to borrow a poor comparison from George Lucas. It's like poetry, it rhymes. But you can jump in on 1 or 2 or 3 and have an absolute blast.
So, kind of talking about that, these are so many great games. Kind of like, how would you recommend someone who's new to the series? How would you recommend they kind of like get into it? Should they start with the very first games, Xenogears?
Well, first off, you need to save up hundreds of dollars and start scouting on eBay. No. This is the obvious question. I've honestly been giving it a good hard thought as to how to answer this. Where it makes okay. I'm going to describe 3 different use cases. You ask for one answer. You ask for one question. You get 3 answers. Hi, I'm Reku.
Oh boy.
So, if this kind of crazy, dense, complex, and fulfilling storytelling sounds interesting to you, we haven't even gotten into the characters yet. Oh my god. But three simple tracks, and I'll try to make this quick. The obvious track 1 is play it from the beginning. Play through Gears. Play through Saga. Play through Chronicles. These are 7 games with two additional story DLCs in the Xenoblade Chronicles series. 10 games.
Wow.
Wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Anyway, tons of games.
Quite a few
You'll
games.
have enough. Yeah, quite a few games. You'll have a blast. Play them in production order. You'll love it. That is prohibitive for a lot of people for a lot of reasons. First off, Xenogears, finding a copy. I don't know if it's available on the PlayStation Store, and if not, good luck. Xenosaga is long out of print. Good luck finding those games. And so track number 2, Xenoblade Chronicles 1, 2, and 3 are all on Nintendo Switch. You can just go buy it. I would play those 3. 3 really awesome open world RPGs, great story. There's enough JRPG there to last you for several months. You'll have a blast. If you're going to pick precisely one game to play through, I would recommend Xenoblade Chronicles 3. But the heart of Xenoblade Chronicles 3's story is very much about these cast of characters you see in the foreground. There is other stuff from the prior games that matter, but it's really a story about kind of like shared trauma and kind of breaking an eternal cycle of violence. And the story it's really good and heartfelt, and also with 3, but also with 2, but especially 3. I mentioned a lot of these games have recurring themes, recurring narrative devices. There is a lot of Xenogears in Xenoblade Chronicles 2 and 3. And so if you play nothing but 3, you'll get a lot of what this series is about in one installment. Right down to some absolutely bug nuts. I was mentioning, if I say it now, it's a spoiler. If I bring it back, it's a spoiler. But no, like,
bring it on back.
I meant like, separation between the physical and spiritual self. Sometimes these can exist in simultaneously, and kind of merging back into a complete being is how you save the world or make peace. Being a fragmented person doesn't work. You can't do it. A lot of the characters you see here, a lot of the villains are kind of reject the natural flow of the world. And I don't mean like some sort of like, we want to take over the world. It's like, no, they reject the very notion of spirituality and like the fact that time, they reject the natural order. That's the best I can say in a clear conscience without spoiling a really, really cool game.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like I've kind of butchered my explanation. But yes, if you're only going to play 1, play Xenoblade Chronicles 3. You will learn a lot about the kind of storytelling Tetsuya Takahashi enjoys, a lot of the themes and influences he likes. And also just as a matter of cinematic storytelling, like, oh my god, Xenoblade Chronicles 2 and 3, I feel like he has really honed his craft.
And there's cat girls, apparently.
And there's cat girls. You got cat girls.
That's a plus.
You got cat girls. You got robot people. Some people have wings in their heads. Why do they have wings? Don't worry about it.
I'm not worried about it.
Good. You shouldn't be.
And this is the most recent game in the series.
That is correct. I forget the exact release date for Xenoblade Chronicles 3, but it is the most recent one. I know I mentioned that none of the Xenoblade has required reading. There is one little asterisk to that. Xenoblade 2 and Xenoblade 3 do have story DLCs, and these aren't like little side missions. These are like entirely separate games. For Xenoblade 2, this 2's DLC, the Torna, the Golden Kingdom, you're expected to have played Xenoblade 2.
Yeah.
For Xenoblade Chronicles 3's, Xenoblade Chronicles 3, bleh, that's a mouthful, story DLC, Future Redeemed, you need to have played the entire goddamn Xenoblade saga. Wow, that's confusing. This is the entire Xenoblade series.
I see.
One story DLC, so forth and so on. But the actual like numbered titles, you could jump in wherever you want and you'll have a really good time. But if I had to pick one, I would recommend 3, possibly 2, but I think 3 is the stronger standalone entry.
Well, it looks really slick, and this is available on the Nintendo Switch, as you said?
That is correct.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. This is running on an NVIDIA Shield tablet from 10 years ago.
Wow. Yeah, it looks, for a Switch title, it looks great.
I want to know what dark magic they did to get it looking this good. Like, I'm a 3D tech artist by trade in Meat Space, and I have no idea how they do half the shit.
Yeah,
Just to get this level of fidelity and detail with like complicated shading models and lighting. Like this is an anime. You're playing an anime. They got cell shading looking really, really good.
I was about to say this kind of look and feel of the Xenoblade series really kind of like marries kind of like the really kind of like super saturated kind of like old school anime kind of look and feel with kind of like the smoother 3D models you see in the Saga series, but then it comes back around to kind of like a nice blend of those two, I think. With
honestly, I think a lot of that just has to do with the tech evolving.
that's true.
There were some cell shaded style games during the PlayStation 2 era. I'm blanking on that, but like it didn't look great. The first cell shaded game that I played that like honestly I still think kind of holds up is Jet Set Radio on Sega Dreamcast.
Oh yeah.
Now mind you, there are technical limitations, but like they got an aesthetic that works. But yeah, I think this is clearly a style they're gravitating towards. I don't know if this was the objective all along and just now they had the tech for it, or if they wanted to do more anime stuff in the Xenosaga era, but they just didn't have the tech.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I know you mentioned you wanted to talk about some of the characters. What in particular did you want to focus on there?
So I'm going to speak in generalities because I do want people to go back and play these games. But at least this is going back to Xenogears. Another thing, one of the big things that really jumped out at me with Xenogears is just how deep the character writing was. All these characters, like every character in a story, in a well-constructed, well, that's maybe being reductive, but like the depth of these characters' stories was like unlike anything I had ever seen or played in any Final Fantasy. Not throwing shade, I love Final Fantasy, but Xenogears took that to a completely different level, including with its antagonists. None of them are featured here, but like the lead villain in Xenogears, that was one of the first examples I can think of where maybe you sympathize with him, maybe you don't, but like he's a villain, he's doing very bad things, but you understand where he's coming from. You know his history, you know his backstory, you see the trauma he has faced and just the times he's been let down by the world, and you understand why he would take the actions he did. This is a sad and broken man just trying to find some answer in the world. There's no Machiavellian like, aha, I want to rule the world. There are characters like that, but they're not the focus.
There's not a lot of mustache twirling, kind of like, I want to destroy the world kind of thing. It's someone that's more understandable, their motivations at least.
Yeah, and that applies to multiple characters in the game. There are multiple antagonists in Xenogears that like, clearly they took a wrong path, but what's the trope? One bad day? Maybe not one bad day, but one bad lifetime.
This is my villain origin story.
Yeah.
I burnt my pancakes.
Yes. But then even with the characters as well, Faye has seen some shit. He doesn't know it yet because he has amnesia, but he's seen some shit. All the characters are really, really well written to an extent that nothing really struck me to that level when I was a kid until I played through Xenogears. And, you know, I mentioned I played this game like 5 or 6 times. Every time I played it, I learned something new. I noticed new details, little throwaway lines at the beginning that seemed like, huh, why do you say that? But then once you know, it's like, oh, that's good. Or, oh, that's really bad. That's real bad.
That's always something that's really refreshing, that has that replayability, that readability, where you can come back to it and find something new every time. That really is a mark of a good story, where there's like just that little bit of foreshadowing that's not too in your face, but really kind of like sets the path for that character or that story. I always think that's really interesting when that happens.
I would say with Gears, so I need to replay Xenoblade Chronicles 3 before I can say this definitively. But I feel like of all the games, Xenogears benefits the most from a replay in terms of following along with the story, especially because, you know, I mentioned Xenogears is part 5 of a 6-part story. Parts 1 through 4 were never adapted, but there are so many little bits of the earlier stories sprinkled in. You know, okay, maybe here's a little something to whet your curiosity. Episodes 1 through 4. The 2 characters here, Faye and the girl Ellie, are the protagonists in all of those.
Oh.
Yeah.
Interesting.
How does that work? You can find out. Play Xenogears and you'll find out.
But this is one of the titles that's harder to find, is that right?
Yes. Unfortunately, yes, it is. I know for a while it was available for purchase on the PlayStation Store as a de facto emulated copy on PS3, but I don't know if that aspect of the store is still up, let alone if it works. Digital games rights are weird and frightening, and we're not here to talk about that.
Yeah, that's too bad. Hopefully, maybe they'll do a remaster someday.
God, I wish they would. I wish they would.
There's lots of this one was developed by Square, is that right? Back in the day?
That is correct. This is an in-house thing by Square. I mean, legally, there's nothing stopping them from remaking it because they own the rights. That's the reason Tetsuya Takahashi made Xenosaga, because he wanted to play with those themes and story elements more, but he didn't own Gears.
Didn't own it. Wow. That's really too bad.
that really is too bad. Like forget years and years ago on forums, like I used to joke, I don't want a Xenogears remaster. I want them to finish disc 2. I want the part that's like largely a visual novel. It's it's a good story. It's still a really awesome story, but I want them to flesh out that game. So give me the same, PS1 era, low res polygons and texture maps. Just finish the game and maybe give it a better translation.
Yeah, it sounds like that second disc back when things were multiple discs. Though I say that I don't know if you've watched the newest stuff for the Final Fantasy VII Rebirth that's coming out in the next month or two. That game is apparently going to be multiple discs.
Well, Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 1, Final Fantasy VII Remake, was also 2 discs. I think it had an install disc and a play disc.
Oh, I didn't know that. I just bought the downloaded version, not the physical version. That's really interesting that they're still doing the 2 quotation mark discs.
I don't know why I'm doing air quotes. My model doesn't have working hands. But no, yeah. So according to legend, who knows where they want to do this, but like the end of disc 1 could have been a feasible stopping point, kind of like a cliffhanger ending, but you can see why they would pull the plug there if it was going to be 2 separate games. But for disc 2, like I should have gotten you some visuals for this, but like much of the narration and visual novel elements, either Faye or Ellie or Stan or some other characters sit in a chair on an empty stage and narrate the story to you with a backdrop.
Oh, wow. That does remind me of Ava at the very end of Evangelion.
Oh, there is a chair, isn't there?
Yeah, he's sitting in the chair.
Yeah, and there have been a couple of nods, usually loving, wow, this person plays a lot of Xenogears, to that in some other games, actually. Hi-Fi Rush actually had a pretty good rip on that very bit. They did the chair joke.
Oh, really? In Hi-Fi Rush? Yeah. I must have missed that part.
Yeah, I think it's right before you do the final big stage. Um, I actually watched a brief like Zoom interview or something with one of the Hi-Fi Rush developers talking about that segment, and you know, like a bunch of the development team loves Xenogears because of course it's the best video game ever. I'm right, don't at me. And they're like, hey, we want to do this, but like their lawyers were like, whoa, 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 whoa. Let us call Square first and see if they're cool with this, because like there's a fine line between homage and copyright infringement.
Yeah, you don't want to mess with a big company like Square, I would imagine.
Yeah, well, now Square Enix, but
yeah, exactly.
when they called Square Enix, apparently like, hey, we want to do this thing, and they probably had a couple of mock-ups and storyboards, and Square Enix's response was like, yeah, sure. Why are you asking us? This is fine. Do you want any materials for this?
Oh, wow. That's generous of them.
Yeah, like, one thing that's curious, like, okay, nostalgia, nerds will buy old shit from their childhood because they're nerds, guilty as charged. But they're actually coming out with some Xenogears merch on a fairly steady clip these days.
Really? Interesting.
By steady clip, I mean like maybe an item or two, item every year or so, but on a pretty regular clip. They've released action figures of Faye and Ellie. They've released action figures of some of the robots.
Wow, for a 25-plus-year-old game.
Yep. And now you can get the model kits for the primary robots for almost the entire main cast. There's only one character who's left out, and I don't know why. I've got one of the model kit boxes that my partner gifted me, and I need to actually put them together. The problem is they're unpainted, so it's just matte gray, and I need to paint these kits.
Yeah, painting a kit is another level of gunpla.
Well, I've been asking for Xenogears kits for years, so I need to put my metaphorical money where my actual mouth is. But yeah, the fact that they're still releasing merch on a not infrequent basis, I need to verify this, but I've seen over on Torment Nexus, I mean Twitter, that I think this year, as part of the 26th anniversary, they actually announced another new action figure for the character Bart. If you've seen him in some of the art, he's the guy with blonde hair and an eye patch.
Yeah, I think some of the art, like I got, crops him out, but I remember seeing him like this one. You can only see his arms, but you can kind of see him
reminded.
here. Yeah, there he is.
I'm reminded of the running gag in like Monsters Inc. Like Mike is like, I'm in the picture, and like he's covered up. But yeah, Bart's getting an action figure. So who knows? And there are a couple of little nods to Xenogears that Square puts into their other properties. There was like a little, I think it was like an RPG. I don't mean this as a pejorative, like a simple RPG gear marketed mostly towards children called World of Final Fantasy. And the Xenogears is a super boss.
Huh.
Yeah.
In that game.
And I think they've also had some Xenogears cameos in like some of their other mobile games too.
Well, maybe we'll see a callback to it in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. If we have that same section.
Oh.
Do you think they'll do it?
Oh God. Okay. Sparrow, you put the idea in my mind, and well, you're in too deep. We need a kick. We're in too many layers of Inception here. No. I hope they do. I would say it depends on how far along the Final Fantasy VII Rebirth story goes.
Yeah,
and we don't know where they're going to end, and we also don't know how much Tetsuya Nomura is going to Tetsuya Nomura the third act of the game.
Very true. Well, I think we've covered a lot today. Is there anything else you would like to kind of like discuss before we head to a short break?
Were we gonna keep? Were we gonna keep? I'm blowing my own tongue. Were we gonna keep talking Xeno after the break, or were we going to maybe jump into a game mode?
I think we might try to do a tier list, and then perhaps we will jump into a game if we have time afterwards. But
okay. Well, then before we go to break, I do want to go off on a little bit of a spiel for a moment. I'll try to keep it brief.
Go for it.
I could use a stretch break as well. I'm over 30 and my back hurts because I'm over 30. All these games, yes. All praise the Chu-Chu who died for your sins.
All praise the Chu-Chu. She died for her sins.
Man.
Amen.
Nah, like Xenogears has the whole series, but especially Gears, has a very special place in my heart. It is my single favorite game of all time. it put me on my career path through a very convoluted sequence of events. I finished the game and I loved it so much I wanted more. And so what do I do? What do you do when you're an obsessed fan in high school? You write fan fiction. It's all gone and burned to ash. Don't ask for it. Don't look for it. But the game meant that much to me. I kept playing the game over and over again, and I just absolutely love the world, the characters, the battle engine is great. This will always be my favorite game. It has meant more to me than anything else I've ever played. I don't know how well it would resonate to new fans these days just because of how storytelling and gameplay has evolved. But like, I really appreciate you inviting me on to gush about this for an hour and about an hour, 20 minutes going now. I really hope more people discover this series and play them. And if you can't access the original Gears, you can get a similarly emotionally gripping story from the Chronicles series. So find the original if you can, would always be my recommendation, because of course it is. But look at Tetsuya Takahashi's work. The level of I don't know how to describe it. This kind of storytelling and these themes clearly mean a lot to him, and it just comes out in all of his work. Play these games in any form you can. You're going to be in for a treat.
I really love that, and that really resonates with me as well, Reku, because that time in our lives when we're teenagers, between kind of like adulthood and childhood, I feel like this is when these kind of stories really hit hard. They really hit our hearts. You know, we're probably going through something at that time, and really getting into these type of stories, you know, for me, I had various other RPGs. And this is when I was just getting into anime myself. That's when that kind of like hyperfixation really seems to set in for people of our generation.
Yeah. Well, and also another cool thing, at least about that particular point in time, like, yeah, there was an internet, but like there was no YouTube. You really had to go out of your way to find fan communities, and so like
that's true.
One thing, like, I don't really follow the fandom discourse all that much. That's just not how I choose to spend my time. So I've played through all these games pretty much blind, even the newer ones. But especially back then, like, just seeing what the different plot twists were and the reveals. I mean, if you're good at guessing narrative stuff ahead of time, you're going to know certain things pretty early on in Xenogears. But me being a dumbass teenager and a slightly less dumbass adult, you know, not so much. But like, just the sheer scale of these stories, the sheer scale of these arcs. Like, it's a common, you know, Joseph Campbell's the hero's journey. You know, every protagonist in these series do go through a journey, and it's, you know, it follows some of those common steps, but just like every character, Fei Fong Wong is just some guy. And just the sheer challenges he rises to not just save the world, but actually achieve, you know, self-actualization as a person. Similar things happen in Xenoblade. You know, Shulk has a similar level of an arc. Rex in Xenoblade 2, his arc is much more simple. He's just a good boy, and damn if that ain't refreshing sometimes.
A good boy. We love a good boy.
And then Noah in Xenoblade 3, like, these are all people thrust into incredibly violent circumstances, horrific circumstances, and finding their place in their world. Like, these events are happening around them. They're not even pawns. They're that low on the food chain, metaphorically, or sometimes literally speaking. But they decide they're no longer happy with their circumstances, and they form bonds, they form connections, they make allies, and kill God is cruel. Let's go kill God.
I think I really kind of understand why that particular storyline resonates. When you're feeling powerless, the best thing you can think of is rising above that and killing something with more power. But you know, something when you feel powerless, it feels nice to live out that fantasy in some ways, you know, of rising above it, killing some evil force that has a hold on the world. I know there's times when I wish I could be of more use.
Well, if we can't kill God, let's at least stream on Twitch, right?
Exactly. But I think it is time for a bit of a break. And when we come back, we'll continue our discussion. We're going to do a tier list of the games. I'm really curious. I think we've already gotten a little bit of like, I can make some educated guesses of where we're going to go with this. And then if we still have the energy, maybe we'll play a game. But before we kind of like take this quick sign off, Reku, did you have anything in particular you wanted to plug?
Yes, I've got a few things. First off, I mentioned this before. I do stream on Twitch myself. Let me just type in the URL.
Yeah, type it in.
Can your actually, you may need to post it because some channels don't let you post URLs.
Oh, I can do it.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I stream here on Twitch myself. Most Mondays, Thursdays, and Saturday mornings. I kind of jump between kind of longer form gaming on Monday, whatever the heck I feel like on Thursday. And as of lately, I've been doing some live 2D rigging on Saturday mornings. I am coming to completion of my live 2D model in the near future. That's exciting.
Woo!
So yeah, if my rambling sounds like something interesting, I like to gush on things I like. So please follow me. I need the validation.
Yes, please check out Reku's channel. He's got some great stuff going on over there.
Other than that, I'm gonna have to send you a link to then send over. I just sent it to you on Discord. The other thing I would like to plug is not so much me, but there is a YouTuber group that I've been following pretty regularly lately called Gatai Universe. I have spoken with and or met or known some of these some of the streamers there for quite a while. They're all funny. They're all just great people. Tune in, watch any one of them, you'll have a really good time. There's like, you've got 8 different ones to choose from, and you can't go wrong.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Reku, and for everyone for sticking with us in the chat. We really appreciate it. We're going to take a quick break, and we will be back in about 5 minutes. See you then.
Cool.
Hello, everyone. We are back. I am here again talking with Rekujira about the Xeno series. We just finished up a great conversation about all of these great games, and now I thought we would change things up a little bit. Let's take a look at this. Take a look at this.
Oh boy.
All right, let me fix my screen a little bit. All right. Can we see? Can we see the whole thing? Not quite. There we go. That's a little bit better. Maybe make it smaller. But I thought we would take a try at filling out this tier list. And I was looking at this just a minute ago, and it looks like some of the games are like doubled up.
Yeah, I'm noticing that. I'm seeing at least 2 copies of Xenosaga Episode 1.
Yeah, it's like some of them look like they're doubled up for whatever reason, so we'll just be cognizant of that, I guess, when we're doing this.
Maybe some rankings merit repeating.
So
that's how these work, right?
Yeah, maybe that's it.
Okay.
So like, I guess should we just start at the left-hand side here? With there's Xenoblade Chronicles 2, I guess it's the definitive edition.
So no, that is Torna the Golden Country, which is the story DLC. It is a prequel that was frequently alluded to and very strongly matters to the central story of Xenoblade Chronicles 2. But it is a standalone game that you could play, you could just buy it on its own. But anyway, yes. Torna was quite good. I felt like they took... So I like Xenoblade Chronicles 2's gameplay, but it is, oh my god, systems on systems on systems on menus on crunch on crunch. Xenoblade Chronicles 2's gameplay is extremely crunchy, and I like it, but I have brain worms. With Torna, the Golden Kingdom... Is it Golden Country or Golden Kingdom? Anyway, with Torna, they took the same core engine and kind of just focused it a bit, and I feel like it's a much better is subjective, but is much more approachable and kind of cuts to the quick, just the best parts of the combat engine. The story in Torna is good, but by the time you play Torna, you already know the nuts and bolts, as has been kind of explained in the main game. And there is kind of a pretty bad side quest grind at the end. For now, let's put it in B tier, but I may come back to that.
Okay. So not quite great, but not quite bad. Quite right in the middle.
Yeah.
All right. So compare that to, I guess, its base game, Xenoblade Chronicles 2.
I'm gonna put Xenoblade Chronicles 2 solid A tier. The story is some really, really good Prime anime bullshit. Lots of really fun and colorful characters. My only real gripes with the game is I don't especially love the to paraphrase, you unlock new character classes with a gacha system. Now, important disclaimer, there is no real world money component to this.
That's good.
It is strictly gacha with items you acquire in game. But it does get very tedious sometimes if you're trying to get a very specific character. But still, tell you what, why don't we call Xenoblade Chronicles 2 A with an asterisk?
Okay.
Yeah, because it's got really fun characters. The music is absolutely stellar. That is a recurring thing with many of these games. The only reason I wouldn't get, I put the asterisk there is the gameplay may not be everyone's cup of tea just because of how complicated the system is. It's very rewarding when it clicks, but boy, there's a lot to process. On my first playthrough, there were entire systems I didn't engage with. But I also didn't go for like 100% super boss. So.
Got it.
Yep.
Okay, so comparing Xenoblade Chronicles 2 to the original, I guess, Xenoblade Chronicles, how do they stack up?
Someone's going to get mad at me for this. I like Xenoblade 1, but it's my least favorite of the trilogy. I'm going to put it in B.
All right.
Reason being is the overarching story is good, but I mentioned I played it in God's Intended Japanese. There is party banter, and because I don't speak God's preferred Japanese, I miss so much of that. So there's a lot of characterization that I feel like I missed out on, even though I played the game twice.
So the banter doesn't have like subtitles, or it just goes too fast? Oh man.
Yeah, no subtitles. There are some like side story cutscenes with characters, but you have to that I think it fills in a lot of the backstory. Not so much backstory, but like fun character moments are gated behind a progression system, and it is incredibly crunchy grindy to level that system, and I just couldn't be bothered. Also, the combat is fun, but it's clearly their first attempt at that style of combat, and looking at it through a 2024 lens, I'm not going to say it's aged poorly, but it's clearly version 1.
Yeah, version 1.0 of something that then became, they built off of that.
Yeah. And to clarify, like, I know people look at tier lists differently. Like, I look at B as, it's a good game. I genuinely enjoyed my experience. And it's something I will probably take with me and remember for a long time. So, like, B is not a bad grade.
All right. Well, moving forward to Xenoblade Chronicles X for the Wii U. The Wii U.
I'm gonna put this in C tier. There are a lot of neat ideas they tried with Xenoblade Chronicles X. They did a lot with the robot systems, but so many aspects of the game, at least to me at the time, felt like it needed one more, a little bit more time in the oven. Sparrow, you've known me for a very long time. You know I like robots.
I have heard that, yes.
Robots ruined gameplay.
Oh.
In Chronicles X.
Wow, that's something for you to say.
Yeah. The robots look really cool, but like, once you unlock the robots, exploration becomes trivial. And so areas that were really difficult to navigate on foot, that you had to do like complex jumping or puzzle solving, you can just get in the robot and fly around.
And that's bad?
If exploration is a draw for the game, it kills exploration.
I see.
Now, again, this is just my own personal tier list that your mileage may vary, except my opinions are correct. I do need to play X again sometime to give it a fair shake. I will gladly give that caveat.
And remind me, where in the sequence does X fall?
So X was released between Xenoblade Chronicles 1 original version and Xenoblade Chronicles 2, but it's not directly connected to the narrative. It's kind of it's an alternate story, much more sci-fi themed and less kill god.
Okay. So it's kind of like Xenoblade Chronicles 1.5, but not.
Not.
All right, well, let's move into the OG, Xenogears. I have a guess where you're going to put this one, but what do you think?
S tier. Moving on.
Moving on.
No,
Next one.
I mean, well,
Next.
in fact, just grab every copy of Xenogears and let's just fill out S tier with as many Xenogears as they got.
They've got at least 2 on this list for some reason of each game.
It's the OG. This is where Tetsuya Takahashi really just went ham with all the story and character elements that mean to him. It's nerdy as hell. Like, there are straight up Star Trek references in the game, and they actually say, "Oh wow, we better be careful with this term. We're going to get in trouble with Star Trek." That is in the game.
That's funny.
Although the narrative they kind of had to zip through on and makes Disc 2 a visual novel, all the gameplay elements and engines are fully developed. It's still fun. It's still a really awesome RPG even to this day. The only things I would say that haven't aged well are things that just the nature of it being a 26-year-old game.
Yeah.
Things where battle transitions could be a little bit quicker and snappier. The translation is a little wonky, but that's common for a lot of late era PlayStation 1 games. Or was that late era? You know what I mean.
Yeah.
No. Xenogears, best game ever. I'm right. Don't at me.
All right. Next up, we have, I believe it's the first Xenosaga game.
Xenosaga Episode 1. I'm going to call that B tier.
Okay.
It works very well and stands alone on its own. Combat's pretty good. Aspects of it feel kind of slow. And also, there are mechs in Xenosaga Episode 1, the aforementioned eggs.
Eggs.
But they don't play that dramatically different from your ground combat. And in a lot of situations, actually feel kind of underpowered. I'm not really going to call that a negative. That's just how they designed it. I can kind of see them feeling a little underpowered, sort of a balancing factor. It is also the first chapter in a long-running story. So there is a conclusion to that arc, but it's clearly, okay, this is the first act of a much longer story. If that's the only one you play, you're going to be like, okay, now what? That's it? So.
All right. So moving on to Xenosaga Chapter 2. Where should we put this?
Is that, which one are you holding? Is that 2 or 3? Your microphone blurped.
Oh, I believe it's 2. I think this one's 2 and this one's 3. It's a little bit hard to see the images, but I think that's...
I believe you're right.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to put Xenosaga Episode 2... I mean, if we're doing a proper tier list, something has to be D tier. It's going to be Episode 2.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Why particularly that one?
So... the gameplay's got some issues. I was mentioning, combat feels kind of clunky and slow. It's a really freaking hard game, and there's some weird balancing issues. Just to give one example, items heal by percentage, not raw amount.
Oh.
And so you want to conserve your items because, you may not get a 75% health recovery item. There may only be a handful of those in the game. And even if you're getting curb stomped, it's the whole, you have to ration these things out.
And it's legit in that game, not just someone being a hoarder of potions.
Yeah. Combat also just feels very, very slow and not all that satisfying. Like, they tried a lot of things, and I'm going to call a number of elements swing and a miss.
Yeah.
Narratively, the story is perfectly fine. It is much more focused on a couple of 3 particular characters. I think this is when they were still intending to get probably 6 whole games out of it.
Wow.
Because the central core of the story doesn't move all that much. You do get some good information, but it's mostly character driven. But you know, that's one of those, they had to make a change after the fact. So the story's fine, but as a game, two's real tough.
Gotcha. And the specifically the Xenosaga series of games 1, 2, and 3, do those star the same characters? I know at least they have Cosmos in all 3 of them, right?
Yes, your primary cast between episodes 1, 2, and 3 are largely the same. There are a couple of other characters who join the roster as time goes on, but you know, the primary player character in Xenosaga is a woman named Shion Uzuki, and you follow her through the vast majority of the games.
Interesting. Because that's
She
kind of
herself
unique.
doesn't have as much of an arc as Fei Fong Wong or the protagonist in Blade, but you know, the inciting incidents do follow her around.
I see. Well, we already have this one. This is a double, the Xeno Chronicles, Xenoblade Chronicles 2. We haven't done. This is Xenosaga 3, I believe.
Yeah, that's the one. Xenosaga 3 is A tier.
Huh. Okay, so it bounces from D all the way back to A with the 3rd installment.
Yeah. 3, they really tightened up a lot of things. They took a lot of feedback, and combat is fun and snappy. They have mech combat, and mech combat feels appreciably different from Xenosaga 1 and 2. It actually borrows a lot of elements from Gears as far as like action economy and all that. They really honed the art style to what I feel is the best version of the Xenosaga aesthetic. The story is a bit rushed, but you know, much like Xenogears, they did what they had to complete the story, and I respect them for that, even if at moments it's a little inelegant. The music's really good. Yeah, Xenosaga 3, I would call that, you know, the most polished of the trilogy. Solid entry. One thing to note, Xenosaga 1, 2, and 3 is a direct continuing narrative with the direct same characters. I said with Xenoblade, you could jump in at any installment you want and get the heart of the matter. If you're going to play Xenosaga, you got to play 1, 2, and 3 in order.
You have to play them in sequence. That's good to know.
Yep.
Well, I think we've got some doubles here. But then I don't think we've done these 2.
Okay, that's Xenoblade. I still see...
Yeah, there's Xenoblade Chronicles.
We did Xenoblade Chronicles. That's the one for the Switch remaster, which it's the same game.
So
everything I have to say about Xenoblade Chronicles 1 applies to the Switch remaster, with a very well earned and acclaimed coat of paint.
So you think it still belongs here in B next to its counterpart for the Wii?
For me, yes, I would say so.
Okay.
Some folks are going to disagree with me.
Yeah. Last but not least, I guess we have the most recent game, Xenoblade Chronicles 3.
I'm going to call that S tier.
Oh, wow. Up here with the OG.
Yeah. Narratively, a lot of what I love about Xenogears is present in Xenoblade Chronicles 3. The way they do their cinematic storytelling, there are some absolutely gut-wrenching, ball-your-face-out moments in Xenoblade Chronicles 3. Masterfully done. Yeah, let's see. The combat also combines the best of both worlds of Xenoblade 1 and 2. It takes out some of the... I mentioned Xenoblade Chronicles 2 combat is a little too crunchy. Exactly as I said, they take the best elements of 1 and 2. It's really awesome. The characters are good. They all have complete arcs, mostly. The open world is fun to explore. Yeah, this is why if you only ever play one game in this entire series, if you can't play Gears, play Chronicles 3.
Awesome. Well, I think that kind of takes us full circle here. I think that's all of the games. I think these are all
The
doubles.
Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. Chu-Chu died for your sins. Amen.
Chu-Chu died for our sins. Amen. I think this is a good place to kind of call it. I think overall this has been really fun, really interesting, and thank you so much for spending your Saturday night with us, and with me and with Reku, and giving him this space to talk about something that he loves so much, the series of his heart. This is what this whole enterprise, this whole talk show is all about, is talking nerdy about the things that we love. And that was so much fun. Thank you again to Reku for joining me to talk sugar about the Xeno series, and make a tier list with me. I really had a blast, and I hope you did too.
Yeah, no, I had a real good time. This is a blast. This has given me a chance to, kind of brush up on having to revisit some lore that I hadn't looked at in about 15 years. And it actually just kind of like rekindled my love of this series. Just through sheer happenstance, a couple of people I've been following on Twitter recently, are like Xenogears focused accounts posting all this really, really awesome fan art. And that's how I found out about the 26th anniversary being today of all days.
That is such a funny coincidence. Spoiler, I didn't actually plan this, but wait, yes I did.
Yeah, that's right. We established it. I'm the one who got Keikaku.
All according to plan.
I have been teasing the idea of replaying Xenogears, maybe on stream, maybe not. I don't know. It's such a long game that long format games may not be the best to stream, but at the very least, even just me as personally, like I've been so close to doing a replay. Maybe I'll make that happen this year.
Oh, we'll have to see. Chat, let us know what you think. But in the meantime, please give Reku a follow. You can find him at twitch.tv/Rekujira. That's REKUJIRA.
That's a meme.
And what else? Was there anything else you wanted to promote? I know you had talked about, what was it? Oh, Gatai Universe. That's right. Yep. So please check those guys out. They're doing some really cool stuff on Twitch.
Yeah, they all stream individually on Twitch. It's 8 separate performers that work under one. I guess they call themselves I don't know if it's agency or group. They're not corpo. They're all indie streamers. And they all have different areas of interest. Like some are really big into like tokusatsu. Some are big into gunpla building. A couple of them are artists, and so they'll do art streams. Go watch any one of them. They're all great.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for joining us. And where can we find you, Reku, if you want to be found, other than Twitch? Is there any other place you would like our followers to follow you?
Yes, let's see. I should have prepped these links ahead of time.
I can throw them in the description after this, but if you have anything specific you'd like to shout out?
Yeah, let me get you the link to my link tree, because that's sort of my aggregate to all the everything.
Yep.
Yeah, but I post on the, the normal socials fairly regularly. I also have a YouTube channel on that link tree where I keep most of my gameplay VODs. If you like what I do, I can be found, and I would be happy to hang out.
Awesome. I'll make sure to post those links in the description of these videos when it goes up on YouTube.
Thank you.
And the VOD on Twitch. But I think that is it for tonight, everyone. Join us next time. This is a monthly series, so next time will be in March. I don't know the exact date yet, so please follow this channel for updates. But next time I will be talking about One Piece with my partner. He goes by several different names. He hasn't decided what name he wants to go by specifically for this stream, but we will be talking about the manga, the anime, the live action series One Piece, and I'm really excited. We've been rewatching that series with our child and it's been really cool to kind of like revisit and see how much, some things don't age quite as well as others. But overall, it is an excellent and a super fun series, so I'm really excited to share that with our audience next time. So please don't forget to hit that follow button or subscribe to make sure you get that notification. And my cat is right in front of my screen as I'm trying to read my script.
Well, isn't that what they do? They're
Yes.
just doing their job. It's not an intrusion, it's production assistant.
Yes, his tailless butt was right in front of my screen as I was trying to read. But as I was saying, I really appreciate all the love and the support this channel has gotten so far. And if you can help us spread the word and help us continue to grow, you will earn my unending gratitude. You can find me here on Twitch, streaming fun conversations and chill games every week. And you can watch me live or check out my VODs on YouTube, as well as on various social media platforms. All my links can be found on my link tree. It's linktr.ee/SparrowB. So I hope you'll join us next time. Stay sweet, y'all. Have a good night.